1 second. We are live on Channel 8 and YouTube.
Great. I'm off mute. I'd like to call this meeting of the Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order. We are operating remotely as per the emergency orders as per the Baker-Polito administration. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe we have a flag. So if we would stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, thank you everyone. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded by Templeton Community TV, and it's also on our local cable stations. It can be found on Facebook, so I want to again just always thank TCTV for helping us out with the broadcast of this meeting. And I will go through who we have on the call this evening. For the school committee, we have Mrs. Matson, Mrs. Kojal, Mrs. Chartier, Mr. Marks, who doesn't have video on yet, and Mrs. Trifilo. We have Dr. Casavant, our superintendent. I believe I saw, yep, there she is, Kate Calise, our assistant superintendent, Anne-Marie Geister, the business manager, Susan Varney, our executive administrative assistant extraordinaire. We have Abby Bennett, one of our student reps, and I don't know, Abby, if anyone else will be joining from the student reps, but if they do, once we get to that point, obviously I'll add their name in. And myself, Mrs. Hughes from the school committee. So we do have a quorum, and we will begin our meeting with our business. We normally do minutes. I know I did not have an opportunity to review the minutes, but if there's enough people, does anyone want to make a motion, or does anyone would like more time to look at the minutes? We can approve them next meeting. If that sounds good to everybody, that sounds good. I see some heads shaking. Okay, so we're gonna put off approving the minutes from January 20th as well as February 1st when we meet next week. We'll put them on the agenda, and that'll be just some of the regular business we do before we jump into our budget presentation next week. So thank you for deferring that. We have bills and payroll up next. I would entertain a recommendation to accept the bills and payroll warrants as presented. Are there any out there? I didn't notice. Anne-Marie, were there warrants to be approved? Because I don't see
Yes.
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I attached them, but maybe after you saw it.
Okay, yeah, and I printed this 2 days ago, so it probably was, and I don't have double screens tonight, so I'm kind of running off the cuff with this one. So I would entertain a motion to accept the bills and payroll warrants as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Kojal. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
Second.
And I have a second by Mrs. Trifilo. Any questions or comments on the bills and payroll warrants? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mrs. Matson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yeah.
Mrs. Chartier?
I'm going to abstain. I think that's the right move as treasurer.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So the motion passed with 5 approving and 1 person abstaining. That was Mrs. Chartier. Okay. Next up, we have our student representative. We have Abby Bennett here with us this evening. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Abby to give us an update from what's going on from a student's perspective and any other information you'd like to share. So welcome.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. My name is Abby. I'm a senior here at Narragansett. And so I would like to start by saying that since our last meeting, we were fortunate to have been granted a snow day. It was very exciting. Administration and the yearbook posted lots of pictures of how students and staff spent their day. We were really grateful to have a nice day off, especially, a nice break from virtual learning. Then since we're now in February vacation, we were able to rest after what seemed like a busy end to semester 1. So hopefully from this break, we'll be able to start semester 2, or it started, but, continue semester 2 very strong. Then as far as sports go, both the girls and boys basketball teams were fortunate enough to play roughly 10 or so games each against other schools. The students were really glad that they were able to make something work during these difficult times. The games were live streamed and posted online, which got really good turnout from the community watching. And then our next fall 2 season, as they're calling it, will be starting in March. So more sports will be starting then. And I apologize if I missed any sports this past season. Then lastly, the Warrior Leadership students have been really working hard to do more positivity themed projects for our school. So last semester they did like game nights and posting weekly positivity, quotes and slides and things like that. Then they were also doing pen pals. So, reaching out older students to younger students to really get the community involved. Then next semester, we're going to be this semester, we're starting new projects such as, making a positivity wall in the high school lobby. So that'll be made up of student artwork, things that will help boost the school spirit. Then we're starting like a study group. So that'll be, kind of like a peer pals, but like a student mentoring kind of virtual thing. Then we'll also be having student run social media pages, which is really nice. So the students are getting to share things that they think are important. And then, we're still going to be continuing these previous projects. Then just this past week before vacation, actually, they sent out a survey. It was like kind of a Valentine's Day themed survey. So it connected people with like interests. So we're hopeful that that will, help bring people in that weren't really friends before, and hopefully bring positivity up in the school. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks, Abby. Sounds like there's a lot of great positive things going on. I love the study groups that will be happening. That sounds really good. I know that a lot of students find it difficult with our hybrid learning model, or even those that are remote. So that I think is going to be a really great thing for a lot of students. So it sounds like that Warrior Leadership Group is really taking the bull by the horns, as they say, and just coming up with a lot of great things for the students and the activities. So thank you for sharing with us. Anybody have any questions or comments for Abby? Nope. I think we're good. Thank you, Abby, for your report. And as always, you're welcome to hang out with us for as long as you can. I know that you do another meeting on these evenings, so whenever you have to drop off, not a problem. So thank you. I did want to announce that Mrs. Robichaud has joined us from the school committee. Next up, we were supposed to have a presentation by our Director of Pupil Services, Matthew Holloway. He had actually asked if we could defer his presentation for a month. We underwent a review by the state of some of our programs, and those the results of that review are due back, I think, within a week or so. And he asked if we could put off his presentation so that he could report on the results as well. So we said, not a problem. He will be back with us probably in March, at the end of March, and he will be able to present with all the information he was preparing, plus the results of the survey. So that'll be a good presentation for next month. Next up, we have public input. I don't believe that Mrs. Varney has received any emailed input, and I'm going to apologize because I failed to bring up the YouTube feed. Are there any comments or anything that we need to address at this moment?
No, there are not.
No? Okay, we'll keep an eye on it. And if we're able to review any of the comments as they come up, we certainly will. So we thank the public for tuning in and watching us. Mr. Mason has joined us. So I just want to add that out to my list. Okay, so next up was the NDEA. I don't see any reps from the NDEA this week, and that's fine. This is vacation week, so I hope that all of our teachers and of course all of our staff are enjoying some downtime and taking some time for themselves. Next up, we have the budget. Quick FY21 budget status update. And then we're going to do an FY22 budget presentation. So I don't have anything really new on my end to report on the FY21 or 22 budget from a state perspective. I don't think there's really much new information that's not going to be covered in our presentation. So with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Casavant and Ms. Geister and whoever else needs to speak. And we'll move forward talking about FY21 and then into FY22.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what we're going to try to do is Anne-Marie and I are going to try very hard to kind of split the conversation. I'm going to try to share the screen, which will be interesting to see what happens. So if it doesn't share, let me know. I don't know if you can see it. Hopefully you can. All right, so far so good. So you know, in terms of talking about the budget, you know, one of the things that we struggled with early in our conversations, we didn't have a lot of information at the time when we were trying to put something together. And generally speaking, it's that's a frustration we feel every time during this time of the year. We're trying to get state numbers, Fed numbers. This was a little bit more difficult, just given that the pandemic has made everything more difficult. But I will say that for the most part, and certainly Anne-Marie can correct me, unless there is a seismic shift at the state level or at the federal level, we have all of the numbers that, all the information that we need to present the budget. So that's good news, right? So we're not waiting, say, on a Chapter 70 number or something to that effect that would really not allow us to speak, at least with fidelity, in regards to the budget. So we do in fact have the numbers that we need. So I'm going to, just so everyone knows, this is not a slide, a PowerPoint presentation. We actually put it on a PDF, which I can scroll back and forth. So if I'm a little heavy handed and I fly through some slides, I apologize, but I'm sure that will happen. So actually what we decided, in terms of giving you this update for the presentation, we're going to, and I know that folks hate, folks like this, but I'm going to tell you the end of the movie first before you see it. So that way, a lot of this can get lost, the main points can certainly get lost as we go through a presentation. So I'm going to ruin the end of the story, so to speak. I'm going to give you the ending first. And so let's see, it's already jumped in 3, 2, see, look, I knew this was going to be a problem. So what I'm going to, there we go. So ultimately, we always start with needs, when we started to talk about that, and I'm actually one page, see, this is going to be, there we go. We'll see how this goes. All right. Usually Kate mans this part of it. So it's a good lesson for me. It's going to take all available funding resources to adequately fund the FY22 budget as we present to you today. And as Anne-Marie and I will go into in depth in this, we see the reality that, and certainly our recommendation that we'll have to use every penny of the E&D. And again, we'll get into this. We have not added any additional staff through the general fund, although there will be a considerable increase to class sizes at the elementary level, and that's something that we're going to talk about here today. And we were able to maintain level services because of the various COVID grants, but in the end, when the math was done, we were still $188,345 short, but that will be covered by CARES 2 funds. So we're going to present, I've presented 5 budgets to you. And so never have, I don't believe, I've given you all the information up front, but this is, it's a really, in a way, so we're going to take the path now to show you how we came to this realization. So the district needs is where I started incorrectly a few minutes ago, but we needed a high school physics teacher or science teacher, but specifically for physics, and to expand our Project Lead the Way program, which, by the way, is one of only 11 programs in the state, K through 12, and we were recognized earlier this year. But we also knew that we needed to do it we needed to provide this with no additional cost to the district. We needed to ensure that all the academic and special needs services remained intact, which again, given some of the information that I'm going to provide you, you'll see that that was yeoman's work and it took some creativity. HVAC upgrades needed to be advanced to a more technological monitoring system. We, as the school committee knows, we moved pretty quickly at the end of the summer to mechanically improve our HVAC system, which of course provides, you know, fresh air and filters the existing air, and we, over a period of about 5 to 6 weeks, were able to meet the standards, not only that the standards that we identified in the MOU, but that the national associations had set in terms of outside air flow. Class size reduction at the elementary school, that's a need, but it certainly is going to be one of our pressing concerns, which we'll get to, but it's going to be difficult. And we knew that we need to address learning gaps, social emotional needs related to COVID, which has really, you know, has made a lot of news lately when we start talking about gaps in learning. So how are we going to meet those needs? Well, we're going to, and again, these are specific to the bullets ahead. So when we start talking about the high school science teacher, I'm going to use specifics on purpose because it's important for folks to know and for you to know how we were making this all happen prior. We lost a music teacher, a high school music teacher, I would say at the beginning of September, maybe at the end of September, beginning of October-ish. And that was Mr. Jody Clapp, who actually filled almost 3 roles for us: music, he taught physics, and he also taught some math for us as well. So when we lost that position, we not only lost a great guy, but what we ended up also creating are 2 holes, with one within our science program and one within our math. So the plan, and to meet those needs, is that we filled the high school position for this year anyway with an interim music position. But the idea is to take one of our 2 music teachers that we have at the middle school and place that music teacher solely for high school music, and hire, utilizing the position that was the position of the music teacher at the high school, and take those monies, if you were, to actually hire a science teacher for the high school. So, and again, so as we look at the needs, we've met the goal. We identified the need, and we were able to cover that without additional cost to the district, or to jeopardize the scheduling, which is obviously very, very important, especially when we start, looking at the high school and middle school schedules. We needed to reorganize special education delivery. We're going to talk a lot about special education tonight, and you're going to see that numbers have certainly increased, but they've increased only in certain areas. And again, we'll go into that, but we knew that we had some folks in positions that we could either eliminate positions or restructure. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. We got to explore opportunities with both towns, so the Green Communities programs, in terms of our HVAC, but and as well as anticipated grant opportunities to the federal government. What we know is that regardless of whom people voted for president, both administrations want children in school now. That's and now there may be a different path, and the conversation may be different, but both administrations feel that children should be in school sooner rather than later. With that, though, comes some pretty expensive upgrades to schools. We are very lucky here in Narragansett. Our HVAC mechanically is very sound, and again, we spent quite a bit of money to make sure that was so, in terms of filters and regulators and the whole bit. But that is going to be a recurring theme sooner rather than later. And so we are starting to look at those opportunities. We need to use CARE funds to reduce class size to address learning gaps. And we're going to talk about CARES, but what folks know at the elementary is that there are 3 teaching positions that have been funded through CARES 1, and that we will utilize CARES 2 in order to keep those teachers for the next school year, but it's going to look a little different. And again, we'll talk about that. And we're going to need to expand our summer school programs. And by expanding, I mean that, again, a lot of this information is trickling out, not only at the federal level, at the state level, but we know that we want and need to offer opportunities for students during the summer to help close some of those gaps that were just inherent of COVID. So, and what I clicked it to, but I'm not going to go back because I'll probably lose the entire presentation. But we didn't want to come here with issues or goals without answers, and so that was our kind of our focus. Enrollment has been something of a myth. It has been, folks have, when we start talking about enrollment, and either at the state side, locally, even across the country, what we know is that our enrollments have declined, and many districts, funding depend on per student, whether certainly in Massachusetts, but across the country. But it was what numbers that folks were going to use at the state and federal level to fund us really became a conversation. So, and it's still a conversation because they did use our October 1 numbers. They did in terms of the foundation monies, etc. Now we're held harmless, which means that we are in essence receiving funds for more kids than we actually have. And we've talked about that almost every year coming, when we start designing the budget. But I wanted to show you something here real quick in terms of when you look at just this, when you look at this year. So if you look to, for example, October 1, 2020, our elementary numbers, show 569 students. So this was October, on or about October 1, and we took those numbers. And then again, we just on the 17th, as we do monthly, we took another census report, and you'll notice that we gained 17 additional elementary students. And so, as we were talking this through, some folks, well, that must mean that, students are back, maybe coming off of, maybe out of homeschool, or, some other, variables. That's not the case. These were 17 move-ins. We're going to talk about homeschool here in a little bit. But when you start looking at our elementary numbers, and you just look like October 1, which was, a few months ago, and look to what was a few days ago, we increased by 17 students. You'll notice that the high school went down roughly, was it, six students. 2 of those students were life skills students who aged out of the high school. So we're holding, not only are we holding steady in terms of our school enrollment, we actually have increased the number of students that are in the district. So this really colorful graph, and so hopefully I'm going to explain it, because what we need to do is we really need to project, and the only way to project is to look at cohorts. Okay, so I'm going to talk about homeschool. We call this slide obviously the homeschool factor. So the homeschool factor is that to your left, FY20 up here, is what you would see typically for the number of homeschool students for these for grades K through 5. As we look back over the years, the numbers may change a little bit here or there, but for the most part, this is a good representation of how many homeschoolers we had K through 5 in the previous years. If you look just immediately to the right of that, to FY21, you see an increase, obviously close to about 38 or 39%, but we saw quite an increase of students that parents decided to homeschool. Now, when we did homeschool, when they would call in to let us know that they are because they have to unregister basically from the district, many of them, you know, and I'm going to say in the high 80s, 90%, percent of folks told us that they were, in fact, homeschooling because of COVID. There was a reason if they gave it. But they also said that they were going to come back once they, once everything, certainly got better in terms of COVID. Well, when that is, I mean, I would imagine is up to the individual parent. But I want to give you a sense of where we're heading, because those numbers that we showed you earlier, they didn't include homeschool kids. So if you look at, for example, and really all you have to do is just follow the color, but if in fact, oopsie, this is what happens. Yep. I have to be careful. Sorry, guys. If you look at FY20 and you see the number 2 and you look diagonal and you see 12, obviously by next year, that's plus 10, right? Those are 10 kids. Now, so if 2 is basically our average, what we see, and now we're sitting at 12, well, that's that's 10 more kids that I need to at least at some level expect to return. And you could do that across the board. And we did that just for the elementary. So you can see that if, for example, the 3rd grade next year, if in fact, the average is around 4, but 14 of those, 1st graders this year, or last year, they're this year's 2nd graders. Well, that's another plus 10. So in other words, we could very well see a situation in which 10 kids come back who were here just say in August or September, or certainly were enrolled. And that creates a problem, because if you look below in projected classroom sizes, and it's just a straight across, is that you are looking at numbers of 28, 30, and 25, and obviously you can see that. And that's what the potential is, that if homeschool students whom were just enrolled come back to this, come back to their classrooms, come back to the district, and that's not taking into account any additional move-ins, etc. And if you notice, again, because I want to make sure that for those of you of the community who are watching, is that we really only have 4 teachers per grade level that are funded through the general fund. Okay, so if COVID didn't happen, it just didn't happen, we only have budgeted 4 teachers. And of course, that was established, well, I guess 2 budget cycles ago, in terms of, a failed override, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to always make sure that, I go back to this, because it's important for parents to see what the potential is. And when that'll happen, if it will happen, we'll have to see. And we're hopeful that, that we're all back in school traditionally next year, and for all the right reasons. But next year won't look this bad for all the grades, because, and I'm going to stop right after this because I know I've just dumped a bunch of information, but we're going to utilize the 3 CARES 2, those teachers that we have at the elementary school to offset and physically, they currently are servicing they are just servicing remote kids who are remote. That won't be the case next year. They'll actually be in the building, and they will actually have a classroom, and they will offset our highest 3 grades, whatever they may be. It looks to be 2nd grade, and it looks to be the 3rd and the 4th grade, but you never know until you know. So we're lucky in the fact that we have these CARES monies available for FY22 to help keep these class sizes down to a manageable level. But again, I want to make sure that I keep, I just keep repeating that those monies will not be here forever, quite frankly. And I think we're all, we're very aware of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, hopefully without screwing up the PowerPoint, I'm going to just stop for a sec, because we've talked about a couple of things, right? So we've talked about overall enrollment, but we talked about the district needs and, the way that we see to meet them. And so I'll just pause there and ask if there's any questions I can answer now before I move on. Or I can just keep moving on.
I know I can't see everybody's square. So
Yeah.
if someone on the committee does have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. Otherwise, if there's no comments in the next few seconds, I'd say go ahead and move on. I'm just trying to see if I can flip through quickly. I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I think it's fair and safe that if you want to move on, but anyone, if you have a question, please feel free to just speak up, since I can't see everybody at the same time.
Okay. So our old friend school choice. So we've talked a lot about school choice over the years. It certainly is and has been, utilized in all the appropriate ways as a revenue stream. But as we all know, that we took a pretty firm stand on school choice last year. And what do I mean by that is that we like I'm sure many other districts, but we followed the DESE guidance to the T. And for us, that meant that as people moved out, families moved out, many of them requested that they would be able to keep their children here in the district as school choice, and we use the term school choice in place for that. And we did not do that this year, this last year, or this year, pardon me, because, well, first off, COVID certainly, we didn't know what we didn't know, quite frankly, moving into this. But we also are pretty full not pretty full. We are full at the elementary level and are getting there at the middle school. So we decided the committee decided that we would not accept any school choice kids, with the exception of 6 students who were pre-K at the time and were part of the old, how should I say, really the old way of doing things, that they would come in with the expectation that they would be able to matriculate as school choice students into the district. And there were 6 of them, and we honored that, and that is sunset. But a couple of things I just want to point out is that, and if you look at the numbers, that obviously we lost 57 school choice kids. As folks know, what was really part of our plan is that we always would take enough school choice to, in a sense, cover the amount of school choice students that we lost as graduating seniors, and those whom were 8th graders who went back either to their districts or went to Monty Tech through their home districts. We didn't do that this year. So, so I've been very worried up until the preliminary report came out in December, is what would be this differential. And of course, to lose 50, just 57, and if you multiply that by, well, if you take in 6, okay, so 51, multiply that by 5,000. So when you take that into account, that's a lot of money, if nothing else. But something interesting happened, and maybe it's COVID related. I like to think that, again, these numbers have been trending down for the last 3 or 4 years, but we had the fewest students school choice out of the district, which helped us quite a bit. So, And again, that's been a steady trend, but and when I look back to several, 5, 6, 7 years ago, even before that, 109 is one of the lower numbers that we've ever had, number of students to school choice out of the district. So that certainly helped us. So in essence, our differential was 83, which is not the lowest it's ever been, because it got very low. I think it was 2014 and 15. But it's certainly much lower than it's been in the past. And so again, we'll talk about school choice quite a bit, but what that is, and everyone remembers this this slide, but you know, we, in terms of the receiving revenue, it's quite lower than we've seen, well, since, yeah, definitely since I've been here, for sure. But it's also the lowest sending tuition by a little bit, and the differential, the difference is certainly the lowest that we've seen over the last couple of years. So this looms as something that we'll probably need to address sooner rather than later in some capacity, if nothing else through just lost revenue, but because we spend every dime of school choice. So, and Anne Marie, do you want to just take it for a second while I take a drink of water and hopefully don't lose my voice?
So obviously this is the budget for the school choice, showing everything that we spend it on. But a couple things I want to point out is the past couple years, we have had the Templeton assistant principal in here. This year, we were able to move that position over to the general fund. The teaching positions are still in there, but it's a goal to keep moving those each year, 1 or 2 over to the general fund as well. And the health insurance is, this number that's here represents 3 payments with 9 coming from the general fund. So we have made a little bit of progress in that respect as well, because a few years ago, we were 50-50 on health insurance. So it's slowly getting there, but I'm not sure at the rate we're going if it's going to get there quick enough. So if you actually go to the next slide, Dr. Kazmant. So this is the forecast for the next few years of school choice that I put together. I'm just going to tell you what it assumes. It assumes that every year we're losing 30 students and we're not replacing them, and that every year $50,000 in health insurance moves over to the general fund, that the teaching staff that we have planned in these numbers, it's a 1% increase each year. And then each year, 1 teacher gets moved back over to the general fund. And if all of those assumptions happen, you can see that this is only going to sustain us for the next 3 years. So school choice is something that we really need to have a conversation about and come up with a plan, like moving forward, on how we're going to deal with this. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that.
No. Okay. So this is an important, so we again, the assumptions are very reasonable. And it really doesn't even, again, it says losing 30 students each year. Well, we've already, think about that. We lost, again, the net might be a little bit better, but 30 is an easy loss, right? If you're not replacing it. So, okay. So, there's some good news, in a way, try to lighten it up a little bit here. And so when we start looking at, when Anne Marie and the administrative team look at this and we start figuring out really our expense side, I have to say that we do very well with that. Again, I'm going to draw your attention to the percentages as compared to FY21, and certainly you're going to see some larger numbers, there, and we're going to talk about them. But all in all, the portions of the budget that we can affect You know, and so what does that mean? You know, making sure that we're, you know, not, we're budgeting tightly. And we've talked about that for years, about making sure we know where every dime is spent. And, you know, and making sure we're not duplicating efforts, and, you know, all those just really basic, but at times, you know, sometimes very hard, you know, rules to follow. And so when you start looking at, you know, maintenance, right? And I'm going to let just Anne Marie, because I think that, you know, talking about, you know, in terms of facilities or just maintenance in general, we've been very tight around that. Instruction, obviously, but there's some other, and we're going to get to this in a bit, but obviously there's some other numbers that we want to talk about in terms of what is driving our increase, right? What is driving this 2.61%, you know, increase overall? You've just heard from Anne Marie. It's certainly not raises or more staff, etc. It really falls into the categories of things that we just don't have a lot of control over. And, you know, one of these big areas is special education. You know, with COVID, or maybe just in general, depending, but we've certainly seen an increase in the number of students whom are on IEPs. Now, you know, folks, when we start talking about special education students or any specific population, you know, certainly folks can become guarded and say, well, geez, now you're blaming, you know, the students with special needs, you know, for your budget issues. And that's nothing to be further from the truth. As a matter of fact, you know, in terms of numbers of kids on IEPs who are in the district, you know, we're right around the average, state average. Those, and we have solid programming to support them. It's these outside factors. So when we start looking at the increase of special education transportation, I mean, you know, look, that's a 20% increase on that. Okay. When we start looking at the increase in out-of-district placements, and oddly enough, folks, we actually went down in the number of students that we send out of district, which is exactly the kind. Why? Well, you're just trying to save money, Cassivan. That's not true at all. Yes, I do like to save money. There's no doubt about that. But there are students, you know, students who go out of district they're warriors. They're Narragansett students. And we want them all to be here. We want them to be connected with their community because they live here. These are kids who live in either Phillipston or in Templeton. But when you start seeing an increase of out-of-district placement tuitions, you know, by, you know, over $100,000, give or take, and it's a 30% increase. I mean, it isn't hard to see. And by the way, we don't have much of a say, or we don't have any say over that. It is not uncommon, and, you know, to see residential placements, which we have, some folks, some kiddos in, you know, $250,000, you know, just for one, you know, and one student. And when you start looking into transportation on some of these programs, it's mind-boggling. So when you start looking at the special education costs overall increasing by 6.6%, when special education makes up roughly a quarter of your budget, you know, 24%, well, 6% of that is going to make a significant difference. And it truly has. And so what are we doing about it? Well, we've committed at least 3 or 4 years ago to expand, the number of, school psychologists and different programs here. And the reason why why we do that is that we want to be able to offer not just kids with special needs and who are on IEPs, but all students, a sound social emotional, landscape in which to be educated. But we also know that many of our, when we start seeing increases, many students are identified as having some emotional, disability. And so we know that we need to be better prepared not only through special education teachers, but as a district. And we've worked very, very hard to do that. And I know that Matt will have information on that because that was one of the focus of the evaluation which concluded last week. So certainly one of the major concerns and drivers, and we are not the only one, not that that makes it any different, because I don't care about someone else's budget, but if we were doing something different that was increasing our budget and everybody else's was going down, I would certainly want to find out what we're doing. This has been a problem, certainly regionally and across the board throughout the state. So fixed costs, we've talked about this quite a bit, but Worcester Regional Retirement, will increase 28%. People have to retire, and good for them. But that's something that we're not going to be able to, affect it through the budgetary process. Or at least at this point. Employee health insurance, will increase by 5%. Property insurance went up 17.5%. And yes, we are going to start looking into some ways to, if nothing else, cap some of these increases which have happened. And maybe Anne-Marie can talk about that a little bit. About what we're going to do.
On the employee health insurance rates, we've been being told that, oh, they're going up minimally. It's the rates that have gone up 5%, not our health insurance line.
Thank you.
That 5% was a little bit higher than I was anticipating. That really doesn't equate to minimal to me, but I guess it could be a lot worse. And the general property insurance, it keeps going up and up each year. And now that we've added Templeton Elementary, I'm actually I have all of the paperwork to start next week to put together a packet to solicit quotes to see if we can get some better prices to save some money on there, or at least keep it at what we budgeted, because every year it keeps going higher and higher over what we've budgeted. So hopefully we can see a little bit of savings in that property insurance. But again, like when you total up all of the fixed costs that we don't really have a lot of control over, they're 3%. It's a solid 3% increase over last year. And again, they make up 20% of the budget. So when these increases make up the large part, it's really hard to keep your overall budget at a reasonable percent increase. But I think that we did a good job this year keeping it at the minimum.
Honestly, over the years, we've watched this number go down. We've really tried to keep our expenses when, certainly the ones that we can affect. We've done we've done an excellent job doing that. And that's really through Anne-Marie's office and of course, the building principals, et cetera. So, so when you have expenses, okay, so if we're, 2.61% increase of expenses, which certainly is not, which is certainly within the average range, you're hopeful that you're going to, revenue, at least nothing else, if nothing else matches that. Now, this is the issue probably across the country, municipalities, schools, et cetera. It's about revenue, quite frankly, right? So, if you're going to have a 2.6, increase in expenses, you're certainly hopeful to match that through revenue. And that's just, I certainly never going to happen, but it certainly is not going to happen this year, just given, for example, transportation, which is just regular ed transportation. We're not going to be reimbursed close to what we, thought that we would, obviously, because we haven't been transporting as many kids. That doesn't mean we've taken that money and, done foolish things. We, whatever monies that we didn't spend on the intended purpose because of COVID, we really put a lot of work into our HVAC system, quite frankly, because, if you've met Mike Netto, and certainly I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, right? I'm drinking his water when he talks about, filters are great and all these are great, but it's about what is your circulate, right? What is your airflow? How are you moving the air? And so how we do that is through our HVAC system. It isn't just about filtering the air that comes in or out. It's about keeping that air moving and making sure that you're not expending more energy, or which equals money, doing that. And so we're looking to automate a lot of these actuators, et cetera, which will literally save us, we think, anywhere between 10 or 15, 20%, on utility costs. We think we need to, we've made huge strides this year on some things. And so we're going to continue to do that. But in the end, that's great. But in the end, we're only going to see a 1.66 increase, in revenue, which automatically is a, ready-made, deficit. Just add water, so to speak. And Marie, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, in terms of the
Yes.
effort to, and yeah.
Yes. So we talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about the Sr2 Fund that the district was awarded. And part of the stipulation of that award is that up to 75% of the award is intended to cover the increase in the minimum local contributions to our member towns. So on this slide, I've added a column which you can see that shows each town's, well, the 189,832 is the total of both member towns, what their minimum local contributions went up. So Narragansett was awarded 561,000. So of that, we have to subtract the 189,832 that is slated to go to the towns to cover their increase. And then that remaining balance is ours to use for some of the things that we've been talking about, which there's another slide, which we'll get into more. And I just wanted to also point out, you can see at the bottom, the school choice, we're losing almost $300,000 from the students that we've lost with those slides that were a few back that showed the loss of like 57 students. So when we rely on all the health insurance and the salaries to come out of that loss of 300,000, that's almost 2 health insurance payments for me. So it's big. Like revenue is tough. We just kind of keep seeing it go down and expenses go up. Chris, can you just scroll to the bottom, the next slide, so I can show the assessments? So on this one, it shows each member town's assessments, and what's highlighted in yellow is the offset with the Sr2 monies that covers the minimum local contributions for each town. So with those in factor, Phillipston is their budget for FY22 is increasing $8,720 over their FY21 budget. And for Templeton, their increase is $233,931 over the FY21 budget. So Templeton's seeing a 3.39% increase, and Phillipston has an increase of 0.53. And really, most of that shift is from the enrollment numbers. That's why Phillipston's is so low.
Okay, so I want to move on. We don't have many slides left. So we talked about E&D. And I asked a question, I believe it was during the finance meeting. I honestly don't remember which meeting, but I did. I asked for a historical perspective just over the years, just what was done with E&D, because I really started, my education really in FY16, 17 when I arrived. And so, as I've said, I am, I guess, classically trained by a wonderful. My former superintendent was a CPA who was always very diligent about monies and making sure that everything was, put some aside. But as I look back at this, and again, it doesn't happen with, as everyone knows, it doesn't happen in the same year. We just kind of use this for, the arrows and the color just to kind of show that, in FY11, that's great, but you're really not really expanding it until FY13 or whatever the case is. We just kind of put a couple of examples up there, but for the most part, we have in fact used, well, again, historically, we've used, every dime to balance the budget. I think that, and I certainly made this, the statement that in that meeting that I can't remember which one it was, whether it be finance or just a school committee meeting, but I think this would be the year that we would do that. We have in fact, kept some off to the side in case. I don't see that to be an option this year, just because of the school choice numbers being so low. I think that both towns are certainly signaling that it's going to be a difficult financial year as well. And we've had conversations with them. And I think that and when I said at the beginning, like all in, I think it certainly is not precedent breaking. It's something that many districts have done over the years in order to balance the budgets. We've actually done a nice job, a couple of years back to save a little bit of money from that. But I certainly think that this year is a year that we're gonna, it certainly would be my recommendation, because I'm not sure where else we would find it, quite frankly, to utilize all the E&D. So, one of the things that I want to bring us back, right? Because all we really think about is COVID. That's all we do. We just think about COVID. But if for a minute you can allow your mind to not think about COVID, if this was just, an alternative universe and we were non-COVID, and everything was basically the same financially, which wouldn't be hard, to envision it. We'd be we'd be sitting here today, $188,000, give or take, short. And I have to say to you that I do not know where $188,000 would come. Now, again, remember, we don't have the surplus and, and say, school choice, et cetera. We've cut teachers every year, that kind of thing. So when you start running out of options, I don't want to say that I'm sure glad we have SO2 here, but I'm sure glad that we have that grant opportunity to cover this so that we could at least balance, right? And by the way, provide the educational services that we've worked hard to keep and to create. So if this was a non-COVID year, we would be sitting here to somehow trying to figure out how we would there would be no other right. We'd try to be making up options, as they say, to find $188,000. So what is the CARES 2 funding going to go to? Well, we were awarded, $551,000. The subsidy is what we talked about just a few minutes ago in terms of the monies that will go to the to the towns proportionately. That leaves us a balance of $361. So $188,000. I'm rounding, folks, but obviously would cover the shortfall, which is really mostly the staffing areas, et cetera. The 3 COVID relief positions, which really are the teachers at the elementary school, quite frankly, so just so we're very clear on that, that's what they would cover. And we're always having to restock, buy, new PPE. Luckily and thankfully, those costs have come way, way, way down since last March, April, May, and June. But we still have PPE needs, which, we'll address through that. And I don't know that I usually have the questions slide. I know that I've said this before, but I would be remiss if I didn't thank the town of Templeton for, allowing us to, the PPE needs that we've had, allowing through their utilization, through their allotment, we've, in the very beginning, we've PPE, and I'm trying to think of some other fact off the top of my head right now, but that really helped out. Well, in our infrastructure as well, our technological infrastructure, much of that was covered by CARES monies / FEMA, MEMA, whatever you want to, whatever name it's under at this point. But I want to thank them again for their cooperation, because in those times when we're trying to figure out how we were going to do a lot of what we did do, are doing, they were a very big help to that. So I just want to make sure I say that again, seeing this is the budget meeting. If I had a slide that said questions, it would be up, but I don't.
Okay, I don't know if you want to pull that down for your
Sure.
presentation, and then we just, so I can see if anyone has any questions.
Right.
I'll just kind of start with just a couple general observations, because although it sounds as, we've got a plan to try and get through FY22, we're starting off in the hole for FY23 with $190,000 that an MLC offset for our towns, which obviously in FY23, I have to imagine there's going to be another increase in FY23. So our towns need to be aware this is a one-time thing. And then FY23, they're going to have to come up with that money plus what other additional monies. That's very concerning, obviously. And then, we've got this $188,000 shortfall, which it sounds as if the Sr2 monies are flexible enough to help us close that gap, especially because, when we look at some of the things you've discussed with learning gaps and other things of how we're going to use those monies and strategically put them out there. But we start off FY23 now $190,000 behind, because there's probably no grants. And again, we can't get to FY23 until we get through FY22. But one of these years, maybe we won't be so afraid for the future years coming out of the current one. So I just, want to make sure everyone's aware that, it looks like we're going to get through FY22, but and I think we've said this in the past too, that this isn't the year that we're necessarily too concerned with. It's going to be the following ones. So
I would say, it's interesting because you're exactly right. We seem, and by the way, we're not alone, right? So we just are able to squeak by here. Something happens there. We've been able to duck and dodge as a district financially. Of course I said this again, this was pre-COVID though. So I will give myself a break there, but truthfully, and Anne Marie and I were sitting down, this was, I met last March, April, May, June, we're starting to see how this was starting to, we're like, never mind 22. So here we are, literally only halfway through 21, going 23 is unless there are these continual, I'm going to call them not bailouts, but certainly these grand opportunities. And the state, and municipalities are saying the same thing. So, we have town managers that, who are town administrators who are on our listservs as well, who are going, we're going to be fine this year because we didn't spend anything, or we did this, or we did that, we did this. But, they're going to go to their free cash or whatever. And then what are they going to do next year? So in other words, it's everyone understands that we've got to do what we got to do to get through FY22. But in order to do that, we're going to have to almost expend again all of our our energies, or just utilize these monies that we know are not going to probably be available for FY23. I hate to talk like that, but let's just get through it. But in a sense, you're right. We do have to get through FY22. I can't speak to FY23 other than that the entire district, probably the entire Central Mass corridor, right out here, is going to start in a deficit one way or another, right? Just depending on how folks utilize the monies, either through SO2. But that's exactly what we have. I was happy that we didn't have to abandon any of the of our, any of our projects or our programs, or that we've worked hard, to establish, especially around social emotional learning, but at the elementary level, and of course at the high school level, now that the 8th grade is up there, and we're starting to see some what we think will be some nice residual effects to that. So,
What questions does the committee have for Dr. Casavant or Ms. Geister about the numbers that have been presented and what the strategy that we're looking to implement to get to an FY22 budget looks like? Don't think I see anybody with any burning questions at the moment.
so we'll also know this. So the other part of this, and I certainly don't want to belabor the COVID piece, right? But we have a lot of, when I say extra positions, they are extra because they're being funded through grants, right? So, we've had to, look at what we need next year. And again, some will be leaving. We won't be having some of these positions next year, but what positions we're talking about for next year. But we truly don't know what school will look like next year. And I think that needs to we have to say this again and again. When somebody says, well, we'll be back. Well, as I said at the beginning, regardless of who you voted for, both administrations wanted us back in school immediately. Okay. They had very different plans on how to do that, but they wanted kids back in school immediately. There is going to need to be some things that are going to happen. And by the way, I'm going to leave money out of it for a minute. I'm going to leave money off to the side, right? We all know we need money. Everyone knows we need money. But there's a very conflicting guidance that's coming out, either through the CDC, which everyone was like, yay, the CDC. Well, be careful that, depending on what side you sit on this issue, the circumstances in which they've put in place that will bring children back, they have a color system. Everyone has a color system. 90% of the country sits in red right now, to this day, right now. And we're actually doing better. So, right. So you've got that issue. So the CDC came out with some guidelines, said, look, kids got to be in. We don't need vaccinate teachers, which I'll say for the record until my death is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. If you want kids back in school, vaccinate your teachers, right? Vaccinate the very staff that are going to be there. I don't take many political stances, but I'm going to tell you right now, the protection of these teachers are important. But that's looming large, because people are starting to now go, well, wait a minute. When is this going to happen? And so now we have testing, which is great. Massachusetts is only going to cover the testing to the end of March. Do you know how expensive this testing is? Oh my gosh. I mean, for a pool testing, it's something like $5,000 per, I'm going to call it a vial, or a container. If you do that for 180 days times, how many different, vials, forget about it. Right. So, I mean, it's, we understand we understand what we need to do. We need to test, we need to be vaccinated. Ventilation needs to be fixed. Narragansett sits in very, very good position. It does. I'm not just saying that because I'm the superintendent. I would tell you if we were not, because this is well beyond, kind of the hey, we'll be all right. We are far in, advanced in terms of our testing abilities. I'm talking about the COVID rapid tests and the batch testing. Our nurses are trained up. Not a lot of people are that. Our HVAC system is mechanically very sound. We are in good shape when it comes to that. So we are already at 3 feet. If you haven't seen how this information is coming out, if not in the news, but in these listservs, people are now starting asking questions of like, okay, they're signaling that they want us to go to 3 feet. Right. Well, we're at 3 feet, which, by the way, we knew was the right move at the time, because first off, we could only fit like 3 kids in a room. In some of these rooms, I don't mean to joke, but it was so few, it didn't make any sense. And so we're really at the point where we're like, okay, we're kind of where we're at. So I don't know how school is going to change, but I will say from our perspective, short of money, which we'll always need, they're going to have to take a very careful look through the school committee lens. We're all going to have to take a look at the guidance that's being now presented in terms of what teachers, or school staff need, what parents want and need. By the way, everybody's on both sides of these issues about having kids in. What's the spacing? What's the distancing? How is going to be, if I offer you a COVID test and everybody gets COVID-19 vaccinated, pardon me, and you decline, which is your right. Now, what does that do? Do I now need to have do we need to consider things differently for one or two people? These are the things that have never been discussed before that it's going to impact school and what school is going to look like. So there's my rant, because the budget in terms of what we need to do for FY22, we believe we have that. We believe that we have a good path forward, but a lot is going to change moving from this point on till the beginning of school. That may very well require, I don't know, massive changes, if nothing else, to the protocols, I guess is the word I would use.
Thank you. And thank you, Anne Marie, as well. Does anyone on the committee have any other questions? Because from here, our next steps are, we have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday. It's a budget presentation to the public, where we'll basically take the presentation that was just given to us. I'm not sure, what additional, if there will be additional information or whatever added to it. And that'll be really our first publicly announced presentation of this budget, which is what will precede our official budget hearing on March 3rd, where we'll get to hear more from the public. So at least they'll have a chance next week to digest this information and then have the ability to comment during a public hearing on the 3rd. And then we anticipate on the 3rd that the committee would vote on a budget at that point, and we would certify some numbers, would be our expected path. So if anyone has any questions or comments or observations at this point that they want to share, I would say speak up, and otherwise we can move on to our next pieces of business and move through the meeting. So does anybody have any questions or comments on this FY22 budget as of right now? Okay, I don't see anybody. As I said, I just thank you, Dr. Kazavan, Ms. Geister, for all the work that went into putting the presentation and the numbers together, and everyone else on the team who had a hand in that. And I just want to comment on the fact that, remediation is big. So hearing the plans of how we're going to impact the students by using some of these Sr2 funds and, where our resources are going to be, sounds like the right way to go, because we can't do remediation with class sizes that are too large. So this will help us with that. And, unfortunately, we are where we are with staffing, and this will help, fill some of those gaps. So that was good to see that. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So if there's nothing else on the budget, we will skip into the business manager's report. Ms. Geister, if you have anything to highlight with the reports that you've provided.
I just want to point out on the general fund, we've been carrying in fixed charges. If you look at the subtotal page, you see that it's constantly in the red. And I just want to, I think I've said it before, but I just want to say it again, that the reason that those fixed charge lines are in the red is because there's an extra health insurance payment being taken out of there this year. So at the end of the year, when we move monies around, we will cover that deficit. Also, part of what makes up that number is I am able to pay off a couple of our small equipment leases early, which helped out the FY22 budget. Those two leases were the two pieces of equipment that the facilities has gotten in the last few years, and those are coming to an end. And they have a lot longer useful life than computers do. So I'm taking care of those this year just to free up a little bit of money in FY22's budget. The second thing, and these seem to keep popping up on us with not much notice, but we have a new grant. We just found out about it last week. It is called the Coronavirus. There's another term that goes on the end of it, but basically it's more funds to use towards getting you ready to be in school. But the only caveat with this one is we have 71,000. There's a payment coming for half of it in February and the other half in April, and the funds must be used by June 30th. So it's great to get the money, but it's becoming a little bit challenging trying to find expenses that are one-time items that aren't going to be something that you're going to have to maintain year after year. So we've decided with this one, we are going to purchase new textbooks for middle school math. So we'll update their textbooks and their online licenses, which will be a big chunk of this money. And the remainder of this money is what is covering a long-term sub, which has allowed us to open the elementary school for the entire day to serve lunch when we do that beginning on March 1st. So it's a good thing, but sometimes it's a struggle trying to figure out exactly what is the best things to cover with this money.
And I'd just like to add, so that was the back-to-back letter day of last week. We say, hey, we're going to come back full time, but we're going to have to, because of staffing, we can't, do busing. And people are like, oh, great. But then literally the next day, Wednesday, we get this information. And we're going to hire a full-time, interim, person to cover the schedule. So now the elementary kids, when they are in person and they go to school, either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, they're going to be there for the typical school day, like we used to have back in the old days, right? And that was very well received, and it's important that we get back into this because it starts the other conversation. But to Anne Marie's point, we're very thankful, right? But boy, some notice would have been nice, you know what I mean? But again, we're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I think my letter actually said that. We're gonna utilize it the best way we can for kids and staff, and that was a great way, at least for the elementary. So for the kids who are in person, they will literally be on a typical schedule, and having lunch and the whole thing. Which right now it's worth its weight in gold, because kids are really starting to, and staff are starting to fall out of kind of practice. So it was a great use of the money.
Anyone have any questions for Anne Marie or Dr. Casvan on that? Yep, go ahead, Ms. Triflo.
Yeah, just a question of follow up on that hybrid description. I guess you may not have the numbers now, but how many take a second grade? How many students come in on Thursday, Friday, and how many come in Monday, Tuesday? Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, sorry.
I'm just checking on some reporting of the fact that there isn't a double-digit number on those days. So my thought is it a jump to say we could do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, because the number of students coming on those days, both cohorts, is small enough to make one cluster, and they could come 4 days?
I think that, well, first off, we have an MOU with the NDEA in regards to how the schedule looks, or the week, not the schedule, the week. I can assure you, though, that in terms of the number, and you're right, I don't have them, and actually I was going to have them right in front of you.
Yeah.
I was too, because I said, this might come up, but we at the elementary, their maxes are 14 per class at 3 feet. And
But do we meet that with the kids in the different groups, such as homeschool or remote? How many
Yeah.
kids are actually coming in?
I can get you that. There are some grades that, like the 4th grade is I can tell you that the 4th grade is pretty full. Whatever that means. Okay. Under this metric. In terms of the younger grades, yeah, we have seen quite a few kids whom are not, we just don't have the numbers, but I can absolutely get that information. And we were just literally looking at this because of lunches. Again, just the number of lunches, because they have to be at 6 feet. Kate.
I just wanted to add to that the numbers, if we can only have 15 at one time, if you have 20 and you have 2 groups of 10, it might seem low, but you can't put them together because you can't have more than 15. So it's based on the space constraints.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point that out, that each group by themselves might seem small, but together we can only fit 15 at once in most of those, I think at all of those classrooms, if I recall correctly, Chris.
Yeah, I understand that, and I really am just hoping that September brings something a whole lot different, because I was hoping we could edge into that a little more at the end of this year, but we'll look at those numbers and see what they are for the space constraints. I'm sure you've done that with the lunches coming, but I don't know that we've talked about it in a bit.
Well, so to the point is that, so now the new bus guidance came out, and 2 kids can sit in one seat, which, by the way, I'm happy. So this isn't my next comment. I don't want to shade away from that. I'm happy about that. What has changed since the beginning? I'm not trying. So this is what so all I want to know, and I aim what has changed. Well, the guidance has changed. Okay. So the guidance has changed. We're very good at what we do. I'm talking about all of us in schools. That's great. That is a precursor to what's, I think, that through probably legislation, because Kate had to fill out the report again and send it off to Desi about how many kids do we have, in person, how many kids do we have that I think that there is, well, they've already said it, that they are moving towards regularity. I think that's how they put it, in terms of normalcy. Thank you, normalcy. And I think that we're going to see something that looks like that this year. So I don't know, I can't tell you what that'll look like, because I don't know. It's not a secret, but certainly transportation was the first, I think was the first mark. And so they're going to have to relax the 3-6 foot rules, and for us to come back to any type of normalcy, because we're almost full in many areas, but not all, to your point, Rayanne. Absolutely.
Yeah, and let's hope they do that after they vaccinate teachers.
Anne Marie, did you have anything else to add? I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to see if we had questions on that particular point. So anything else?
No, that was it.
Okay. Anyone have any other questions for Anne Marie on the business managers reports? Because we are going to now jump into COVID, which we've already touched on a little bit, but I know we do need to talk about the hybrid B transition with the lunches to make that official, and then any other updates. So if there's no questions, I'm looking, I don't see anybody with their hand up, then I'll turn it over to Dr. Kazavant to talk about any COVID issues, including the hybrid B transition.
So just quick, we've just talked with our nurse leader, Mariah, yesterday, and we are literally all set to do, batch testing and the quick testing. So we're in good shape in terms of that. I've shared the update with you in regards to busing. In essence, 2 kids who are not related, from the same household, I should say, can sit in the seats that have been designated, but the windows still have to be open. So it's going to be a cold ride, wear your hat. So anyway, so that's been great. We've, so before you tonight is, and again, this plan was created back in, oh boy, July, August. It had focus groups at every level. And in essence, we had a hybrid A and we had a hybrid B. And really the difference between the two was that hybrid B had lunch involved. The only reason why we did not go to hybrid B at that point in time is that we did not have the staff at that point. We were still hiring, trying to find, staff members, because again, we had to spread out and do those type of things. So we knew that it was better to start slow so we could go fast, which is funny because it's now, well, almost March and we haven't been able to do lunch yet, but we're prepared now. So before you, to change that to hybrid B, that we would, I would believe that, you would need to vote that because and again, I went back, I believe hybrid A was voted on. And Ms. Hughes, please correct me. I'm trying to remember. I'm sure it had to be voted on. The plan had to be voted on. But in terms of the internal change, we are going to start lunch March 1st. Which is great. And so that would be really hybrid B for us.
Okay, yes, and I think as you were saying, the school committee does need to just vote to make that official as we transition between the different plans that we have. So tonight, I would entertain a motion to change to the hybrid B model, which includes lunch delivery, effective, you said March 1st, I believe is the correct date. So I would entertain a motion to do so at this time.
So moved.
I'm not sure who that was. I'll take Mrs. Kojal just because I saw you first, and is there a second?
Second.
And I think that was Mrs. Mattson maybe with a second. I'm not sure. I'm sorry, Mrs. Farney, I think she's shaking her head, so that'll do. Okay, any questions or comments on that motion and the plan to move to the hybrid B model serving lunches effective March 1st? Okay, seeing none, we will do a roll call vote. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal?
Yes.
Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So the school committee has voted unanimously to move to the hybrid B model with lunches being served March 1st. Please, send along our thanks to everyone for all the preparation and, making the necessary arrangements and adjustments to make that happen. I know that the students will benefit tremendously from spending the full day there and get back to a sense of, if they can't be there 5 days a week, at least they're getting their 2 days with a sense of normalcy for a full day. And as a parent, I'm really on board with that. So thank you personally, as well as being a committee member. Any other updates on for COVID-19? I know personally, just because my son plays, I believe football is kicking off fall 2, which is February 22nd, which is kind of odd to be fall, but okay.
We're gonna do it. We didn't give ourselves much hope for basketball, but tonight will be the last night for the girls and the boys, and Abby had mentioned that, and it went very, very well, and we did, honestly. So we have actually, with the exception of being really, really cold and snowy, we're very confident because it's outside, and we think certainly that things will go better out there. But you're right. So the 22nd, which is coming soon to you very quickly, will be football, and there's more to come with that in terms of where the games will be played and all of that. But people are certainly excited, and our numbers are actually pretty high. But 5-game season, again, a pod of just very local teams, and it'll be great, quite frankly. So we'll have a good time.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Gonna get my long johns and big mittens out. Okay. School committee comments. Does anyone on the school committee want to make any comments at this point? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Surplus items, I don't believe we have anything, so we'll skip over that. New business is the FY22 school year calendar. We'd just like to request that Dr. Kazavant put his calendar committee in place and be prepared to present, a draft of the calendar if it's ready for our next regular school committee meeting at the end of March. I know there's a lot of unknowns, so whatever the calendar looks like, with list out whatever the assumptions are, so we can start getting some information out to parents. I think that would be good.
Will do.
And I don't have any. Oh, go ahead, Mrs. Trufalo.
Yeah, in that calendar committee, could there be some information brought back to us about their feelings on snow days, when they are remote, when they want to play in the snow, how it affects the end of the year, so that we have some idea of when the school would end, given that information.
I will do. I can tell you that the state is also going to weigh in this year. I think I don't know if he misspoke, but he certainly told a group of superintendents that they didn't need to have snow days, and we took him up on it. So I think that he's already signaled that he'll allow that this year, meaning we can kind of figure it out. But I don't believe we'll have the same flexibility next year. But I will, though. It's important to know what the committee thinks, meaning the calendar committee as well as the school committee, because I see somewhere in the middle, quite frankly, right? Maybe the first 3 be snowed or something. I don't know, but I will definitely, that'll be one of our discussions.
Great, thank you. Okay, there was no items that came up within 48 hours. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Kazavant. I know you've already spoken about a whole bunch of things, including enrollment and whatnot, but for any updates, if we have anything on the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee, and also the PMES building turnover, because I believe that was effective the 13th. So if you have any comments that you want to add on those.
Absolutely. So, and I only have the 2, quite frankly. So as my letter indicated that I sent to the committee as well as to the select board, Phillipson Select Board, we ended our relationship in its entirety last Friday, and I think I forwarded to you the town administrator's thanks. We did in fact top off the fuels, and we did some snow removal from the roof, which really wasn't us. I have to just we noticed that there was some things that we need to check on there, but that either way the transition went fine as far as I know. Other than Kevin's, email to us just thanking us for the information. I know that Anne Marie has been working very, very closely with the town administrator, for Phillipson, just all the information in terms of, utility handoffs, et cetera. So it's gone very, very well. So I think, again, no news is good news. So I have not heard otherwise. In regards to the RAC meeting, we have a meeting that is coming up, and Susan, next week. Yeah, I believe, I just don't have my calendar in front of me.
Next Tuesday.
So we did receive some information today that folks are going to need to be sworn in who are on the board. Susan, can you just maybe fill in the gaps?
Yes, so we were given the information that people that serve as at-large citizens on the committee need to be sworn in by their town clerk. So each town has 2 at-large members, and we will be reaching out to them to let them know that they need to make arrangements with their town clerk in order to be sworn in.
I offer that as just as an FYI, just to kind of put it certainly on the general record. But we were contacted by, I believe by, if not both, but at least one of the, okay, so.
One of the selectmen in Templeton. The selectmen are covered because they're selectmen and they're already sworn in, as well as the administrators, the town administrators. but the at-large folks need to be sworn in.
All right. Okay, and are we reaching out to those members? It's an interesting conundrum of who they represent, because they're representing the school district, which is its own municipality, but they are residents of the town, and really it doesn't make a difference. You know, so go ahead, let the town clerk swear them in and let them do their duty, and that's great. But are we the ones that will reach out to the members?
Yes, I plan on sending them an email and copying the town clerks,
Excellent.
and then they could take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
And quite frankly, just given everything that we've talked about today, that's all I have for the update.
All right. Last of our regular items here is just a curriculum and an instruction update. And one of the new items that is on here, although we alluded to it at the last meeting, is the program of studies for next year. And really it's just to introduce, to say, you know, hey, you know, we're expecting this coming our way, and I know you're already working on it. So it's more as just an FYI to the public that we'll be looking at this in the next couple of months to have something approved. But I'll turn it over to Kate for what other information that you want to share.
Sure, thank you. Just a couple of quick things. We are working on planning Project Lead the Way, and as you saw in the budget presentation, there's been support from Dr. Cassavant, from, you know, all of the admin in the district, as well as school committee. And I think it's important to realize that Mass STEM Hub and the 1-8 Foundation that give us the grants for it really ask about that partnership, that all of the stakeholders are involved. And I want to just thank you for the support that the district and the school committee has shown to Project Lead the Way. We plan to write a new grant to add biomedical science, and, you know, it remains to be seen how that will go. But if that's the case, then we'll be adding a course in that field, which I think would be a nice tie-in. It's also been beneficial with us when we've had conversations with Mount Wachusett along some lines about career pathways. They feel like that's a Project Lead the Way in general is a good fit for that. So there's that piece, and I can't really ever say Project Lead the Way without thanking the teachers we have, because we have tremendous teachers doing this work, and they're really engaging the students, and the kids love the courses and love the teachers. So that's great. The other piece also mentioned in the budget, and thanks to the support from Ms. Geister and Dr. Cassavant, is the summer intervention planning that we're undertaking. So we're doing that in the next, you know, probably month or more, planning to offer intervention services to students in reading more broadly than we had in the past. I know there have always been summer services for students with IEPs, but these will be services for, because we're school-wide Title I at Templeton Elementary, so any student who is struggling within the capacity that we have with the funds we have, we're going to plan a program. So that is really great news, you know, given COVID and the difficulties some students are having.
Sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Thank you. Yeah, and we look forward to hearing more information as you start to put those plans together and what they'll look like. I'm encouraged by the fact that I know everything that I keep seeing about the Sr2 funding and some of the other grants, you know, the focus on remediation and making sure we have these summer programs in place. So I think it's going to be imperative, you know, that we provide the services, and we'll look forward to more updates as you have them on what our plans are.
Yeah, and I would just say we're positioned very well to do this, because we have a really awesome intervention staff that works with elementary students throughout the year. So we're going to be meeting with them. We have a meeting next week, and to talk about the planning of the summer program. But it will be a natural next step for us, and so I expect it to go pretty well.
Great, thank you. Okay. All right, with that, we're on to subcommittees, and I'm just looking through the list of our subcommittees. I think we've pretty much gotten updates for all of the subcommittees through our regular meeting, with exception of perhaps diversity and equity inclusion. I don't know if Jeff, if you had anything new that you wanted to report out right now.
Yeah, if you give me a minute or two, yeah, I can go through real quick,
Yep,
Margaret.
sure.
So I think as the committee's aware, the Diversity and Equity Inclusion Subcommittee is currently reviewing the district's mascot. On the student side, we have we've recruited two excellent students, Maddie Ambrosi and Nadia Surin, who brought some great ideas and tremendous energy to the committee. Our discussions thus far have been focused around Warrior Nation and how how the Warrior Nation is a symbol of the district and everything we stand for: strength, courage, respect, pride. We feel that these great values which pay tribute to the Warrior Nation. So in our discussions, we have talked about how warriors work together as a team, supporting and protecting each other, conducting themselves with honor, meeting competition, challenges, and fair play. So the committee may recall that the subcommittee recently submitted an application to Mount Wachusett Community College to be part of their graphic design service learning project. I'm happy to report tonight that we have been accepted. So earlier this week, the committee had our first meeting with Anthony David, who is the student appointed to the NRSD project, okay? Our initial meeting focused on the committee's goals and visions for the project. Our plan is to work with Anthony to develop several schematic designs for us all to review and scale down to a final design. So the diversity committee feels that not only with this, with the service learning project, but with everything that the committee does, it's crucial to listen to the perspectives of our students. As I stated earlier, I feel blessed that we have two representatives who are so engaged and constructive to the process. Our conversations have been focused around inanimate objects. That's what we're designing for an unbiased mascot, to make sure that the new mascot would be unbiased. So one of the ideas we're tossing around is possibly looking at a mythical being that would fall within the warrior category. One idea we're thinking about giving to Anthony would be a Trojan warrior. And we're just wondering what the committee thinks of this. If you have any ideas, any concerns, and if anybody doesn't have anything now, that's fine. You can email us out. But I just kind of I wanted to get that out there just to give an update of where we are in the process. I think it's great that we were accepted into the Mount Wachusett Service Learning Project. Again, I have to give a shout out to Kate for pushing that our way. So I really appreciate that. And again, I think the Anthony, who is a student from Mount Wachusett, is great. We had a great meeting with him. So again, I don't want to take up too much of our time. I just wanted everybody to know where we are. And, you know, really before we move forward too far with Anthony, I just kind of want to present everything to the committee and make sure that we're not going down a direction that anybody has any concerns with. So, all right.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Maybe on our next regular meeting, which is probably the end of March, we'll have an agenda item just dedicated to give you a little more time to bring everybody up to speed and get some feedback on where you're going as a subcommittee and what that means. So that would be great.
Again, in the meantime, if anybody has anything, just feel free to shoot it out to us. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other updates for subcommittees? I just wanted to talk, we did get a few comments on the YouTube feed. Terry Griffiths from the select board in Templeton said that Tim, which she's referring to Tim Toth, who is also a select board member in Templeton, had to get sworn in separately for the Templeton Elementary School Business Committee. There's no blanket swearing in on appointed positions, excuse me, still learning myself. Tim Toth then said, if not sworn in, the RAC members cannot vote. This applies to all subcommittees. And I'm going to skip Christine Bennett's comment for a second. I'll go back to her in one moment, because then Tim said, I've learned that all meeting notices must be posted on the town meetings calendar. Various minutes are to be easily available to public for review per open meeting laws, which is fine. And my only comment there, and as I said, it makes no difference to me who swears in who. This subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Narragansett Regional School District, not of either of the towns. But if the towns need to swear their people in, that's absolutely fine. Let's do it. Let's get it done and make sure that we're doing everything properly. So thank you for those comments to both Terry and Tim. We appreciate those. Christine Bennett just asked a question, and I know that we did bring this up at the Academic Administrative Subcommittee meeting last month about the AP. Have the AP test requirements been set for this year with COVID still impeding things? And this was the question about the AP designation on the transcript. If a student feels they're not prepared to take the AP test because of COVID and the way instruction has. And I believe, Kate, you were going to be working with administration to have that discussion, and we should probably have an update maybe next month on that. Okay, so she's giving me a thumbs up. So Christine, more to come on that. It's being looked at so we can make some decisions. I believe the College Board has announced some information on testing. It just came out, I believe, within the last week about how they're planning on implementing AP tests. So we're still learning a lot of what's going to happen. So Christine, we will update on that, and based on the recommendations of the administration through Kate with the academic officer role that she plays. So, okay, I think I caught up on the comments. I see, I'm just going to refresh to make sure. Okay. And with that being said, we don't have any correspondence and upcoming meetings. Again, next week on Thursday, we're doing just a budget presentation for the public. So be on the lookout for some more information on that. It has been advertised along with the budget hearing on March 3rd. So people should have seen that in the paper if you read the paper, and it'll be out, hopefully advertised on our Facebook page, etc. And that will start at 6 o'clock. It'll be via Zoom. And other than that, I don't have anything else. And I'm going to look to the committee or Dr. Casavant or anyone if there's anything else. Okay, and we are going into executive session this evening to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation with the NDEA and or the UFCW if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body and the chair so declares. This meeting will not return into open session immediately following. So I would entertain a motion to do so.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mr. Marks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Mason.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call to enter into executive session. Mrs. Mattson?
Yes.
Mrs. Kojal? All right, she shook her head yes. Mrs. Chartier?
Yes.
Mr. Marks?
Yes.
Mrs. Trifilo?
Yes.
Mrs. Robichaud?
Yes.
Mr. Mason?
Aye.
Mrs. Kojal, I'm just going to see if you could say it again so we know.
Yes.
Okay, now I heard you. Sorry, you might have cut with the music.
No, I froze up for a minute again.
Great. Just want for the record to have it recorded. And Mrs. Hughes says yes. So I want to thank everyone for watching on our live feed this evening and attending our meeting. And we are going into executive session. We will not be coming out. So thank you for joining us, and I'll see the school committee and everyone in